Good morning. Can you hear me? Good. Welcome to First Church, Unitarian Universalist in Boston, in the historic factory neighborhood, which I keep pointing out to people was the bay until the 1850s when they brought in landfill. If you're not here now but watching on YouTube, either live this morning or sometime in the future, whoever you are, wherever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are welcome. I always take a moment to thank I try to remember to take a moment to thank our wonderful music team, Barry Bell this morning and Eric Anderson will be singing for us later. And our guest preacher today is no longer a stranger. She led a couple of services last year, but some of you are strangers. So her name is Rumni Saha. She was born in India, raised as a Hindu, now identifies as a Hindu, a Unitarian Universalist, and a humanist, and has just completed her theology degree at the Boston Institute of Theology and is working as a chaplain for the Dana-Farber Institute. So I'll turn the mic over to Rumni.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to have you, and it's nice to be back. And thank you so much for your words, Peter. So, my opening words today, it's a land acknowledgement delivered by Boston City Councilor Liz Reardon in 2021. This land is the territory of the Massachusetts, Pawtucket, and their neighbors, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples, who have stewarded this land for hundreds of generations. We recognize the repeated violations of sovereignty, territory, and water perpetrated by invaders that have impacted the original inhabitants of this land for 400 years. We extend our respect to citizens of these nations who live live here today and their ancestors who have lived here for over 500 generations, and to all Indigenous people. We also affirm that this acknowledgement is insufficient. It does not undo the harm that has been done and continues to be perpetrated now against Indigenous people, their land, and water. And now the opening hymn, number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth.
There are rarely very many announcements in August. I think today is no exception. As usual, we have a coffee hour after the service, so feel free to join us. And we call it coffee hour out of tradition, but in August, the people tend to be more interested in the iced tea and lemonade that we always have available as well during the summer. And in another month, it will not be summer, and we'll be gearing up for the regular season. I believe we're having a regular Charter Day on the 3rd, or is it coming after water this year? Okay. Stay tuned and you'll find out when we have our Charter Day, but our first summer service, our first post-summer service, featuring our brand new senior minister, Stephanie May, will be held downstairs in the main sanctuary on September 10th. That will be water communion. Those of you who do not know the custom, we invite everybody to bring a tiny bit of water, shot, say, of water from wherever they've been during the summer, or if they haven't been out of town, kitchen faucet is fine. And we mix it all in one big bowl, and do not be misled. It is not a communion service of the sort where we drink the liquid together. No, nobody drinks it. So it's safe to bring whatever you like, and we'll respectfully dispose of it afterwards, but it symbolizes all of us coming together from wherever in the world we happen to be coming from, wherever in the world we happen to have been, wherever we have traveled, and we make one totally blended whole. Is there anything else coming up? Is there anything? We've had our get-together on the Esplanade for the Landmarks Orchestra. I gather they had a good time. I wasn't there myself. I was attending a theatrical performance by our former resident theater company, the Hub Theater of Boston, which was a lot of fun. What else? Nothing is happening. Nobody has anything to say. Rosemary, anything? Rosemary usually has something. Okay. Now a reading.
Thank you. I am so sorry if you can't see me. I was just telling my friend Dara that I will be traveling with a step stool. So the reading, it's a poem by Rabindranath Tagore, and I will tell you a little bit about him before I start, but I invite you to settle comfortably in your seat. You may close your eyes if you choose to do so, or listen just, with your eyes open. Just feel rooted to the place you are in. So the title of the poem is Jibon, which in Bengali, which is the language that I speak, means life. It is by the acclaimed poet Rabindranath Tagore, who was the first non-European to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. He was also knighted by King George V. This is in the early 20th century, but he gave up his knighthood in protest of the policies of the British. Tagore was also a Brahmo, a progressive sect of Hindus with deep roots in Unitarian principles and practices. So Jibon, or life, is translated by Tagore. The same stream of life that runs through my veins, night and day, runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measures. It is the same life that shoots in joy through the dust of the earth, in numberless blades of grass, and breaks into tumultuous waves of leaves and flowers. It is the same life that is rocked in the ocean cradle of birth and death, in ebb and flow. I feel my limbs are made glorious by the touch of this world of life, and my pride is from the life throb of ages dancing in my blood this moment. And now we're going to listen to a musical meditation. It's hymn number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. Feel free to rise. I'm sorry. Okay. All right, so the musical meditation is a hymn that we're going to be listening to. So, sorry about that.
Something stirred, so faint. John Hershey wrote a famous book on the survivors. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Beth.
So I just wanted to thank everybody for the emails and this is checking in. I was in Connecticut for most of the week, a week or so ago, and I'll be going back next weekend for my dad. He's halfway through his radiation and immunotherapy, and so I just wanted, it's a little bit of a joy, a little bit of concern, but mostly joy because it was really lovely to hear from you, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? I am certain there are many joys and concerns in our hearts that we choose not to share. And so I add one final pebble to cover all, because it is what makes us human, our ability to care, to celebrate, to mourn. And now I return to the microphone.
So our sermon reading this week is by Joy Harjo. It's called The Speaking Tree. Joy Harjo is the first indigenous person to be appointed the Poet Laureate in the United States, and this was recent in 2019. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1951, Harjo is a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. And her poem is titled Speaking Tree. Some things on this earth are unspeakable. Genealogy of the broken, a shy wind threading leaves after a massacre, or the smell of coffee and no one there. Some humans say trees are not sentient beings, but they do not understand poetry, nor can they hear the singing of trees when they are fed by wind or water music, or hear their cries of anguish when they are broken and bereft. Now I am a woman longing to be a tree planted in a moist, dark earth between sunrise and sunset. I cannot walk through all realms. I carry a yearning I cannot bear alone in the dark. What shall I do with all this heartache? The deepest rooted dream of a tree is to walk, even just a little ways, from the place next to the doorway to the edge of the river of life and drink. I have heard trees talking long after the sun has gone down. Imagine what would it be like to dance close together in this land of water and knowledge, to drink deep what is undrinkable. And now, please rise in body or spirit as we sing together hymn number 328, I Sought the Wood in Summer. And now, this sermon, I titled it In the Company of Trees. So I felt sort of blessed about the timing of this service. I knew that I would be starting a new job. As a hospital chaplain, there would certainly be no dearth of topics: hope, compassion, trauma, resilience. But as I kept thinking about what to speak about today, I could not get away from the thought of trees. Images of trees kept coming to me. So I decided to stay with the voice inside of me screaming trees, even though I tried to push it away. And so here I am. So my earliest memories of nature are inextricably tied to the garden around the bungalow where I grew up. It was in the quaint township of Ujjain, India. My dad, the CEO of a global steel company, had inherited the impressive bungalow along with a crew of helping hands from his predecessor, an Englishman, after he moved back to England. I was born in that house and spent a magical childhood there. The lush gardens teeming with rose bushes, mango trees, guava trees, and a prized collection of cactuses were my mother's pride and joy. The garden was lovingly tended by our gardener, or Mali, as we called him. There was an unmistakable disparity between us that even a child could detect. Mali avoided entering our house, and on the rare occasions that he did, he took his slippers off on the front porch and bowed in deference like the rest of the domestic help. Even on unbearably hot days, he never asked for a drink of water from the hose outside and drank instead from the hose outside, which too was invariably warm from the sweltering heat. The outhouse where he lived with his family was a humble hut, markedly different from our sprawling estate. His children, even though close to my age, never played with us. I can clearly picture the balmy afternoons when my mom would tour the gardens with Mali, giving explicit directions before her friends arrived for fancy mahjong parties overlooking the garden. Even though my parents are long gone, I can still smell the sweet and musky blossoms of the mango trees in the most unexpected of times. Mali worked 6 days a week, weeding, trimming, mowing, and maintaining the boss's prized garden. Sometimes when I would weed with him, he would praise me or discourage me gently, because the daughter of an upper-class man was not supposed to engage in what was considered manual labor and therefore menial. I too would give up after a bit, as this was not what I was meant to do. I too had learned to discriminate based on class. It had somehow seeped into my psyche. I thought about Mali for the first time in decades after entering seminary, when I was asked to reflect on the roots of my relationship with nature. I was overwhelmed by what I was experiencing. Suddenly, I was beginning to understand that even though my parents treated Mali and his family well, he led a life of servitude. We grew up enjoying nature, its bounty and beauty, lovingly tended by a servant. Although my childhood experiences were not the same as the injustice meted out to the slaves bound to their land, in this land of the free, I began to feel a sense of guilt and melancholy for my home country, shaped by the inequalities of a class system. The disparities based on class and wealth were a part of the landscape, so much so that for most of my life, I was oblivious to the injustices I grew up with in my own backyard. The memories of my childhood garden do not seem so magical anymore. When I was 12, we moved to Calcutta, a concrete jungle where every inch of land was being converted into high-rise buildings. We called them multi-storied. Although city dwellers now, we were lucky because often we visited my father's ancestral home in the pristine village of Halishahar. 50 miles away from the bustling metropolis. The house was a modest ranch nestled in a sea of green. There, I learned about age-old Hindu practices from my grandmother. The Hindus learned a long time ago that cutting down trees was detrimental to the land, and therefore they infused the sacred into them. The example of the banana tree comes to mind. Kala gach. That's what the banana tree is referred to. Kala is banana and gach is tree. So kala gach is considered holy and a staple in every backyard and is used. No festival is complete without a kala gach. And the kala gach is also referred to as kala bow. Bow means bride. So kala gach is supposed to be or believed to be Lord Ganesh, which is the elephant god, his bride. So I would watch with curiosity as my grandmother would place offerings of food and water at her feet and gingerly adorn the kala bow with sandalwood paste to ward off evil. I now realize that age-old practices such as these ensured a healthy sustenance for families. Banana trees are highly sustainable and prolific in the Indian subcontinent. The fruits, both raw and ripe, are edible. The tender bark provides a source of nourishment, whereas the robust leaves are used as compostable utensils for cooking and serving meals. Coconut water, all of a sudden highly cherished in the West, has been quenching thirst in the East for centuries. The fiber from the bark is used for making clothing, rope, rugs, and other items of daily use. The trunk is used for constructing pillars for worship, and as long as the plant is not uprooted, it grows back quickly and fully. Later, as a student of history, I would learn how the sacred soil, or mati, played a major role in India's freedom struggle against the British. Its systemic abuse through the forcible cultivation of indigo to yield the enormously lucrative blue dye in Europe led to the Indigo Revolt of 1859 in India. Although the unarmed peasants were brutally suppressed by the British soldiers, the maltreatment of Mother Earth, or Dharti Ma, was the catalyst for a revolution that would eventually oust the British from India. Fast forward decades. It was in my spiritual care class in my first semester of seminary that I made a commitment to walk with my dog Gutsy on the peaceful Massapag Trail without the use of technology. It was an assignment for self-care that I adopted as an intentional move to connect with the land. Every day, as I walked through the trail, which is right behind my house, I would pass by a massive, misshapen tree, and daily I would, just for a moment, be fascinated by the way its branches coiled into one another as if holding on while drowning. In some places, the knotted branches seemed to be hugging and lifting each other up. Still others appeared to be reaching out in different directions as if gasping for air. The tightly braided branches were meticulously woven. The tree appeared to be magical but melancholy, as if concealing its pain, yet I had never taken the time to stop, look, and listen. Later on, in a travel seminar titled Spirit in Acadia, when I learned about the practice of wound walk, I knew I didn't have to wander too far, for I had already met my wounded warrior, or so I thought. So wound walk is essentially you walk around in nature and then you find something that really speaks to you. Then you sit down and with, intentionality, you try to engage with this thing or this being that you found in nature. So I decided to see what, if anything, the wounded tree had to offer me. It was a time soon after my internship at a Boston hospital where I had met a brilliant young man who had left an indelible imprint on my soul. Ivan would eventually leave the hospital after a long stay with less than favorable news, but endless hope for the chance of a future or at least a reprieve from the fast-growing cancer. Recently, I had learned of Ivan's passing at the age of 27. And although I needed to quickly dive into my role as an adult by disguising my pain, I felt wounded. Although I was somewhat skeptical, I was willing to give nature a chance, for I had nothing to lose. Plus, it was an assignment that needed to be done. I was pleasantly surprised. The outpouring of support when I poured my heart out to the tree was overwhelming. Ivan was not supposed to die, neither was my cousin, my brother, Niloy, at 24, nor was baby Sophia in the NICU, or the other beautiful lives I had encountered, young and old. In the presence of this mighty oak, who stood witness to the ebb and flow of life, I was gently reminded that we are all on different points of the same journey. Fascinated by her knots, I knew that I must dig deeper and unearth its mystery. What caused them to become a part of the sacred biond? What I found out only amplified my reverence for my knotty tree. Insects, fungal infections, diseases are the most common culprits that cause knots, which eventually lead to these knotted branches. But these knots, while often weakening the tree, also increase the aesthetic appeal of the planks that are then sawed off to repurpose them. They are turned into beautiful pieces of furniture that are highly prized because of their unique grain. The tree is doubly wounded, right? First by the attacks of these foreign bodies, and then by the chainsaw of a profit monger. But the tree does not complain and continues to give itself freely to benefit others. In spite of her wounds, she stood with her head held high in all her humble glory. She still provides nourishment to the rambunctious squirrels hiding in her secret chambers. Her braided branches give shade to weary winged creatures. The tree signifies struggles, trauma, loss, but also beauty, generosity, resilience, and continuity. As if sensing my sadness, she humbly reminded me of our interconnectedness, which not even death can sever. I now realize that the beautiful being who I had mistaken as a wounded soul is in fact a wounded healer. I would highly recommend this practice to you. Is it easy? Well, no, not really. Of course it was challenging. Talking to a tree certainly does not qualify as an accepted norm in our fast-paced materialistic world, even though running after the other green stuff is considered normal and even lauded. But the more I stood around, the more animated the tree seemed to become. It was as if she needed to build trust before opening herself fully to me. It reminded me of the mantras that the wise Hindu sages whisper into the ears of a lucky few who come to them for wisdom and discipleship or diksha. Initiation into a spiritual path requires building trust. Discipleship requires patience. Often, when we hear sad news, we try to push it aside with the hope that in time we will learn to live without the hurt. In nature, the cycle of life and death are much more visible. My beloved tree embodies the cyclical rhythm of birth, life, and death. Reminiscing about the joys, hopes, and dreams of the young lives lost in the calming presence of nature was healing. I found solace, hope, gratitude, and a sense of being embraced for who I was. The imperfections on the tree are indeed its assets. I was reminded of Howard Thurman, the African-American mystic and theologian who makes no secret about finding more companionship in nature than among people. The woods friended me, he would later write. No matter what, even as an adult, Thurman was always able to return to the quiet, ever-present comfort of the oak tree where he always felt safe. For Thurman, it was the untimely death of his father and the woundedness of segregation. I remembered how Belden Lane, a theologian, scholar, and naturalist whose readings I have loved, discovered Grandpa, a 100-year-old tree, following a tragedy in his own life. In his book, Restoring the Great Conversation, which is a wonderful read, by the way, if you're looking for something, Belden Lane rejoices in finding God in the ordinary, the rough bark of a tree and the sound of the rustling leaves. Lane finds childlike wonder upon rediscovering, he says, the shaggy-haired Jesus of my youth by bonding with a tall, leafy cottonwood tree. I'm joined with a larger presence permeating the cosmos. Call it what you will. Tilha's cosmic Christ, Rumi's beloved, or Buddha's nature, Spider-Woman's web-weaving magic. It leads me to amazement and praise. My knotted tree would become my leafy spiritual guide that Lane talks about. While what I am saying may seem far out to some, new research into trees has revealed some earth-shattering facts about their secret lives. There is mounting evidence that trees talk to each other and live what can only be described as a communal life. Peter Wohlleben, the German forester and the author of The Hidden Life of Trees, What They Feel, How They Communicate, says that trees are more alert, social, sophisticated, and much more intelligent than what we ever thought. We know that no tree is an island. Hidden beneath the forest soil is a complex labyrinth connecting the roots of the trees, the mycelium and the mycorrhizal networks, or as scientists call it, the wood wide web. What had transpired between this majestic, mystical tree and me was beyond the realm of language. Yet, the realist in me wanted to explore what was really happening. I was reminded then of a story that the Hasidic Jews love to tell. Long ago, the Rebbe's son began disappearing during synagogue services to wander the woods. His father was concerned because he was missing his services and also because the forests of the Carpathian Mountains were dangerous. So one day he asked his son, "Why do you go into the woods, son?" The boy answered, "I go into the woods looking for God." His father said, "Well, God, you don't have to go anywhere special to find the Holy One. Blessed be his name. God is the same everywhere." "Yes," said the boy, "but I am not." There is something different about us when we are in the company of trees. We are not the same. Well, the practice was really an invitation for my mind to engage in the most intimate conversation with my heart. By communing with the earth, we are getting in touch and conversing with our deepest selves. By learning the spiritual practice of listening to nature, we are honing the skills to deeply listen to ourselves and each other, something we often forget to do. It was as if I was being told that it is okay to be sad, whereas the fast-paced world around us does not always allow us to be sad for long. We are constantly told to get over it and move on. My tree was teaching me to slow down. There was no need for hurry. That's one thing that trees do really well. They are slow, refreshingly slow in everything they do. And it is when we simply slow down that magic happens. Trees have the uncanny ability to draw us out of ourselves. We begin to acknowledge the sacred interconnectedness and interdependence of all things, an underlying principle of Hinduism, as well as Unitarian Universalism. I realize that I do not need external stimuli to ground me. What I need to listen to is my deepest self. I'm also reminded to listen to the gentle voice of Mali. I'm renewing a promise to hear the voices that I did not hear growing up. The practice that I engaged in is an example of the healing power of nature. I heard her message loud and clear that in spite of our losses, we cannot give up. We must take in others' sadness and provide them with oxygen so they can breathe, even when we are ourselves running out of breath. We need to send our branches out so others can stand tall. We are beautiful even with our imperfections. We are perfect not in spite of, but because of our wounds. And no matter how defeated we ourselves are, we must always reach out to those who are under attack. There's always hope if only we allow ourselves to look around us with open hearts. In a trauma class that I took recently, I will never forget my professor, my favorite professor's profound words when the question was raised about hope. How do you give hope to someone when there is no hope? And she said, hope is an action word. In times of hopelessness, we can still do hope. Trees do hope. That's what they naturally do. I now understand why, in the midst of terrible sadness in my first weeks at the hospital, these hopeful beings kept tugging at my heartstrings. So today, my hope is that we can all be more like trees and do hope for those around us without a care of who they are, what they look like, or what they believe in. May we listen to the world that surrounds us and talks to us if only we pay attention. May we fall in love again, this time with the sacred bions who can open up a world of wonder if only we allow ourselves to be guided by them. Today, faced with an intense crisis, this world of our extended family needs us more than ever. May we be kind enough and wise enough to do so. May it be so. And now, the offertory. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to pass it on.
A spear of simple
And now the closing hymn, number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. Please rise in body or in spirit as we sing together hymn number 354.
To
extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. For our benediction, I wanted to read the words, you may be seated. I wanted to read the words of Reverend Jessica Clay. She serves the UU congregation in Brewster. Holy One, help us to remain open to hope however it shows up in our lives. Help us to orient our hearts and our spirits towards being present to witness it. When all else seems lost, help us to remember and trust in impermanence. Amen. And blessed be.